mentioned, when we would bring up certain points that he either had no argument for or he couldn't be bothered with really, he just decided to hang up.
Yeah, well,
Uh,
Yeah, he was bored.
and that's all
Bored that there
right. I
was
mean, look,
opposition. He did,
this is free airwaves, and we will,
and
hey,
you guys are annoying.
we welcomed you, so what can I say? But
we
I
want
will say
And your
we
Mark can feel it.
we enjoy annoying.
that's true. I will say one thing about politics, about elections, because I
Yeah.
used to tell my students this all the time. In fact, I even tell my own children when they decide, not to vote. Okay, um, I said, listen, one of the first things that during the Revolutionary War, taxation without representation and not having representatives, and Great Britain telling us what to do and when to do it. The bottom line is that if you want to affect any change at all within the country, you do it by your vote. And I would tell my students that, if they feel that, oh, this is an off election or it's not that important, well, where do you tend to make most of your inroads? It's local politics. So you have to vote locally, and then eventually you vote nationally. But if you don't vote at all, as far as I'm concerned, you really have no right to complain about the way the government is run, because at least
That's right. I would say so.
at least by exercising your vote, you're doing your constitutional duty. Okay. I do believe, as I said to the caller who hung up, that eventually this country will go to a three-party system, because, you will get some disaffected Republicans and Democrats who find they have more in common
Well, what's
than
happening?
they would like to admit, and form a third party.
Well, what I'm thinking at is if as the Democrats go more to the left and the Republicans go more to the right, there might be a middle ground party, moderates.
Well, the old moderate Republicans used to do a lot of business with the moderate Democrats. Back in the day, across the aisles. One of the complaints, and I know that this is a far cry from what you want to discuss, Chad, but the bottom line is, they used to be reaching across the aisle and working together for the benefit of the country and getting things done. And for whatever reason, people did not travel home as much as they do now. All right, so what
Right.
they would do is, they would have dinner together. I mean, it wasn't a sin for a Democrat and a Republican to get together over dinner or drinks, as Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill used to do. Okay, back in the 80s.
Well, from what I hear, they still do. They just don't admit it as much. But I have a question for you, Chad. Do you think religion should get involved with politics?
Did you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, I can
Yeah.
hear you.
Oh, okay. So I was trying something new there. Um, should religious people get involved in politics? I think so. I think that we need to have more godly-minded people in politics. It's just that, you know what? I don't have anything against politics except that it's just not an interest. I but if I were being honest, I would want our country to be ruled by somebody who lives by absolute moralities and logic and reason. Somebody who knows God's principles, His laws. He or she understands that God will condemn the unrighteous. That this country needs to be ruled and go back to its original roots, a place without abortion, places, I know unfortunately for you, Mark, that you're not going to agree with this, but somebody who believes in the godly standards of marriage, between one man and one woman, that's what I support, and I don't think that's a surprise to you guys. I think that you know that about me.
Yeah, but the problem is
Now, do I? No, I'll say this. I'll say that. Hold on, because I know that you want to disable this. Given that, I do appreciate a country that allows us freedoms to do what we want. Now, although I'm going to define marriage biblically, okay, I still think that even homosexuals should have the right to do what they do in this country to make them happy. You know, they're able to, for instance, go to school, get a good job, have a career. If they choose to live with somebody, they should have the right to not be limited in that sense. That's not for our government to decide.
Yeah.
I think what our government needs to decide is how to define certain things. For instance, marriage is a big one because marriage is defined in the Bible clearly. I think we sin in a lot of ways. I think that straight people sin. I sin. You sin. Everybody sins. You know, we sin in adultery. We sin in lying. We sin in theft. So there's not any difference. But what happens with the homosexual community is people want to sort of isolate the idea of homosexuality and then start a fight over it. Well, look, I'm going to say I'm not any different than them. I'm not better than them. I'm just saying that there are certain standards that God holds in the scriptures that we ought to say, okay, these belong to God, not man. And I don't care how nice of a homosexual you know or you may be, that's not what God said. And if God is the creator of the universe, he ought to make up the rules.
Okay. Generation X, is that you? You back?
I'm back. I apologize. I had to take a phone call.
That's all right.
Not a problem. Yeah, so we're actually at...
Hey, Generation X, I got a question for you.
Yes, sir.
I was just curious. You seem to be very conscious when it comes to government work. So you believe in rights and wrongs, goods and evils?
I believe in right and wrong.
Yeah. How do you justify that? You don't believe in a God, right?
Right.
Let me ask you a question. If you were governing the country, what standards of right and wrong would you be using?
Standards as it pertains to what?
Well, that's my question to you is, how do you justify right and wrong in this country? I mean, if you were the president, which I know, you're probably not serious about being, but supposing you became the president of the United States, how would you determine what is right and wrong in society?
Well, I mean, it's a popular vote. I'm not a person to make it. The president's not a person to make a decision for anybody as a whole.
But on some things, I mean, it would be almost impossible to have a popular vote last minute on so many different topics. I think where Chad is going with this, and I mean, he's certainly, capable of explaining it himself. But I think he's talking about using biblical reference as a standard to at least go by. Okay.
Well, hold on, Mark. Hold on. Yes, I that's my worldview, but that's not his worldview. So what I'm asking him though is how he justifies. I'm just curious how he justifies right and wrong. Okay, so suppose Generation X believes in raping women is definitely wrong, and I think that we would all affirm that raping women is wrong. But if there's something not outside of us that makes that determination, I was just curious from his perspective how he justifies raping is wrong.
Well, it's a violent crime. I mean, you just have to use common sense when it comes to anything. I heard you guys talking about same-sex marriage and all that stuff. And how the biblical references to a man and a woman. Well, let's take away the biblical references. Look, a man and a woman were created to give life to other people. A man and a man cannot give birth to a child. So that's wrong. People choose
But
to
you
do
don't
what they want.
necessarily believe in the Bible. You don't necessarily affirm the Bible, but you believe in some of its principles.
Well, I think the Bible is a moral code for people to be good people, for people who are lost, who want to try to be the good person they want to be. I think it's a good guideline for them. I don't believe in Jesus. I don't believe in any of that. I go to church on a regular basis, though. I go to church to support my children, let them make their own decisions. And, and the churches are a great outreach for community services. They do a lot of stuff within the community. So I support the churches as a whole strictly for the community aspect and for the role they play in a young life to teach them the right and wrong, to make them better people.
Well, the church's job, Generation X, is to be able to tell you what God's Word says. And the God's Word says that Jesus is the only way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father but through Him. Now, if you don't affirm that, why would there be any reason to believe in anything? I mean, really, you believe in evolution, for instance? Are you an evolutionary believer?
I mean, people die. That's evolution.
No, evolution means change over time. So do you believe in a macroevolution?
And a what?
Macroevolution. Do you know what macroevolution is?
I know a mackerel is a fish, but explain macroevolution to me.
Sure, let me explain it to you. So 4.8 billion years ago, we come from a rock. And in that rock, it cooled off. We got from there we had the Big Bang. We turned into a rock. The rock cooled. We end up getting the ooze or the goo or whatever you want to say. We turn into the first living organism, the first cell, turn into a little animal. The little animal has branched off into many areas of life, such as plants, animals, and larger species. So what macroevolution teaches is that from one living cell, it has reproduced everything about life. In other words, we come from a lower species of primates, not a chimp, not an ape necessarily, but a relative of the chimp or ape. So do you affirm that we come from the macroevolutionary theory?
I don't. I don't know where we come from. I think there's people out there who are trying to. I think there's people out there who are trying to figure out where we come from. And from where I stand, I'm here. I'm here right now. That's my stance. I don't have time to worry about where we came from, where we're going. I have time to worry about what.
Generation X, you should worry about it, because what that's ultimately going to mean for you is it's going to mean damnation when a holy God judges you. Now, but let me ask you this question, Generation X. If I were able to show you something interesting about yourself, because you seem like an open person, if I showed you something interesting about yourself, would you be open to listen to it?
Sure, absolutely.
Great. Well, let's just use, I'm going to pick up anything here. I'm going to find, I got this little piece of paper in my hand right here. I don't know what this is. Probably a bill. Does anybody want a bill? You guys probably play.
No, we have enough of our own.
All right. All right, I'm holding a bill in my hand here. And I'm going to tell you, Generation X, that I am holding it in my right hand. Now, I know you can't see me do it, but just trust that I am. And even if you don't believe it, just go along with the illustration, because it's not the point. Okay. Now, I'm holding this bill in my right hand, and I'm not holding this bill in my right hand at the same time. What would you say about that?
It's just resting in your hand. I mean, you either are or you aren't.
That's right. And what is that called? If I said that I'm holding a bill in my right hand and not in my right hand at the same time, what did I just do?
You contradicted yourself.
That's right. And that's a law of logic. That's called the law of non-contradiction, which says that opposite ideas cannot be true at the same time in the same sense. Generation X, do you think that law is true for everybody, everywhere, at all times?
I don't know. That's a personal case-by-case basis, I would assume.
You think so, huh? So you think that the law of non-contradiction could be different for somebody else?
I mean, contradiction is contradiction. You either are or you aren't.
That's right. So is that true for everybody, everywhere, at all times?
I can't speak for everybody.